All right, so I'm currently on the phone with Ari. He's another musician that reached out about the interview series. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Ari Koinuma, and I am a Japanese-born guitar player, songwriter, YouTuber. I've written a lot of blog entries as well over the years. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I have a music out under the name Aristotle's Hope, and I just released a new concept album. This is, we're in middle of November 2022, and it came out on November 1st, so fairly recently that I've been working on for the last couple of years. So that's the big sort of accomplishment lately.
Awesome, very cool. So I will we'll definitely touch base on that in a few minutes here. But with these interviews, I always kind of like to touch base, in the beginning. When did you first find music? What about it kind of reached into you and made you want to participate in it?
So um, it was always something that I think was in my life, in that like there was a cassette tape that my mother had of when I was like 3 years old, and I was living in Japan at the time. I'm originally from Japan, and it's me singing this children's song from our fourth floor apartment balcony, like to the world, apparently, and I think that from the grade school, I knew I was good at it. I think it was in the middle school age when I actually thought that there was something to it. In that, until then, even though I knew I was good at it, and I took some piano lessons at the urging of my mother, I didn't think too much of it. Um, and then I encountered rock and roll, and specifically rock and roll in English. So music from U.S. and U.K. basically, um, that I encountered when I was living down in Brazil at the time, and then I don't know, something just really hooked in me, and from then I've been. That's been just like my life's biggest passion.
Okay. And so I assume at some point, being exposed to music, you decided that you wanted to start also creating music. So how did you kind of, take your first steps into that? What instrument did you select for yourself? Did you think about writing like vocal melodies or lyrics? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So yeah, being exposed to rock and roll at that age, I gravitated toward guitar. I got my first guitar when I was 16, and it was a classical guitar, so it wasn't quite what I was thinking about initially. But um, shortly thereafter, I got my first electric guitar, and something else happened was that um, so I was living in Brazil at the time, going to an international school, and that was the first time I started actually like functioning in English speaking environment. And during the summer, my parents sent me to acquaintance in U.S. in Iowa, of all places, um, and I worked at a summer camp, church camp. And so there were opportunities to play the guitar at campfire and things like that. And so in that environment, music is a very integral part of what we do. And so I got my first sort of chops basically playing the guitar at campfires, accompanying camp songs every night. And it still forms a important part of my style. But then, I also got exposed to all the music at the time, and then um, in that environment, a lot of the lyrics, message-driven music was used quite a bit, and I was really taken by how music help us feel very strongly. And in particular, there's an album by Michael W. Smith called "The Big Picture," and then he wrote a whole album addressing different sort of concerns that a teenager would have. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. and it just meant a lot to me to have that album. It just like, this artist and the music, knew a lot of like what I was going through at the time. And so yeah, from that point I was like, well, maybe I can write something on my own. And I wrote my first complete song when I was 18 on piano, like Michael David Smith did. But yeah, so I've been writing songs ever since then, and I mostly like to, even though I'm a guitar player, write vocal songs, and I put a lot of thoughts into my lyrics and stuff too.
Sure, sure. So you mentioned playing guitar at camp, but tell me a bit about going to school in Brazil. What's their music program like? What was your experiences with it?
Yeah, so that's the thing. There wasn't one. It was a smallish, though not small. Like it was a few hundred students, but from like K through 12. Um, and they didn't have much of an arts program. Maybe they had art class. I know they had no music. Um, so I missed out on the whole high school band, orchestra, choir type things that a lot of Americans have opportunity to. So all I had was just I had piano lessons, guitar lessons, which I had a little bit of, and just listening to music on cassette at the time.
Okay, and you just use that as the tool to kind of teach yourself the instrument.
I guess, yeah. And then yeah, having the summer camp to sort of actually play and perform really helped.
Sure, definitely. So, take me through the next steps then. Once you kind of figured out that you do like to write, how you like to write. Well, how did you kind of approach identifying the type of content that you wanted to write, and then also getting to the point where you were producing that content?
So the next step was that I had a choice to go to college, either between going back to Japan or coming to US. And I wanted to come to US mostly because, again, I was really quite smitten with the idea of making rock music in English. Because I listened to Japanese rock, and at that point, Japanese rock didn't connect with me the same way that rock music in English did. So and then I wanted to study music, and then that's another really long story. But I ended up at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, which is a good classical music school. Um, I didn't know how that would play into what I wanted to do because I was into rock and roll, like I said. But my parents basically said, don't go to like a pop music, school, get a real education. So that's kind of was a middle ground. And and I would say that music education at St. Olaf did give me really solid background in that, a lot of the foundation of music theory still applies. I discovered I have perfect pitch and I was really good with ear training. And all compose. I focused on composing, so I can write music for orchestra instruments and things like that. And I mean, these are all skills that still very much come in handy to this day. Um, so and then to be able to incorporate some classical music stuff into rock stuff is just as cool too. So that
Absolutely.
played really well. Although I mean, it wasn't directly exactly what I wanted to do, or it may have been different if I went to like a musicians institute or Berkeley College of Music. That was more of a popular music type environment. But anyway, what I could out of the music, and from there, I think my story is, uh, you know, um, I don't know. It's probably similar to a lot of people out there. It's just you get out in the real world and get a job and try to find projects and bands and try different things and hope that one of them leads to another place. I moved to Austin, Texas, and lived there for a while, hoping that the music scene there had opportunities for me. It's basically you know it's like going through different places and just knocking on different doors. I had stints at scoring independent film, or I produced other people's music on my home studio, and I try like transcribing some guitar parts, and publishing it and things like that. And um, one way or another, like I would try these things, and then inevitably I hit a wall somewhere, and then I'm like, oh, I need to change direction. And so I have like a wandering long list of credits that are sort of very, you know, to put it positively, it's diverse and varied. But um, realistically, if I had focused on one direction or another, it may have gone farther.
Sure. So, well, on that note, let's talk about your concept album. At some point, you did sit down and put the time and energy into creating a full album. So, let's talk about that. What was the development process like? What was it about? Give me some details.
Yeah, so my album is a concept album, so it's like a progressive rock in that the songs are longer and more complicated. Um, and that I think it has some of the influence from the like the progs, like a Godfathers, like Genesis and Yes and those guys, but also has more like a raw guitar rock of '90s, um, in forefront as well. But so the idea of concept album to me is like, well, the idea of an album, right? I am always a believer that if you're putting out an album, the songs hopefully have a reason to be in a group together, and the album to be a larger, body of work rather than some random, songs you have in your canon at the time, kind of thing. And so that's always there. And this is the second time I do a full length album. I did another one in 2007, but this time it came out of my desire. So I had been, doing YouTube seriously for 2 3 years at that point, back in 2019 or so. But I went through a major life midlife crisis, and I ended up, you know, getting out of the marriage, and I moved out on my own, and then luck would have it that a few months later the world had its crisis of its own in the pandemic, and so I kind of started writing songs as kind of as a part of therapeutic um, you know journey kind of thing. And I felt that there were certain songs coming out with certain content, and then after a while I was like, wow, I think I need to turn this into an album, because it just there's something to capturing that moment. And the world is going through a particular moment, and I didn't want to be I think there's a fine balancing act as an artist that we can make in terms of hoping to create something that's timeless and relevant, that can still be relevant in years to come, but at the same time putting in whatever is the of the time to say, hey, you know this is not some generic statement. This is a point in time on a very specific, very personal experience. You know, so yeah. So my album has a kind of a loose story. It's not like a concrete story with characters and yeah, and like a setting or anything like that. But it's kind of an arc about one person's sort of descent into existential crisis, and then there's a suicidal thought at the very bottom of it, and then there is a resolution at the end. So it does get kind of dark, but that's what I needed to put out.
Sure. It definitely fits like the vein of music you said that you were trying to make too. Okay. Awesome. So what are some of your favorite memories of the time that you've been making music, whether it be, back in, at summer camp playing guitar or working on this album? What are some things that like stick out and keep you motivated?
So one memory that stands out is when I was in college and I got into my first real band, which was a cover band. Um, and then the lead singer was the captain of the football team, so he had a lot of following. And we would basically show up at these parties and play. And at one time, we actually were rented a venue in town, and I think there were like, I don't know, several hundred people there. And we had a great crowd, and everybody was having a good time, and I was just having the time of my life performing. And I was not of age at the time, so I didn't have a drop. I didn't wasn't drinking or anything. But I remember feeling afterwards like collapsing on stage because I had poured everything I had into performing. And then people thought I was drunk, but I was like, no, I was not drunk at all. I was just so spent playing and performing. And but then it was like the most exhilarating experience of playing and having people be excited to be there and having a good time and them reacting and all that. And I think that's one of the experience that still kind of drives me is like, to create that experience of performing.
Yeah, that's a very cool experience. Excellent. Do you have any others you want to throw out there?
Um, I'm trying to think what else will kind of stand in my mind. And then there was another era around 2005 when I had a very intense musical period in which I had a young daughter and I was in between jobs and I got two gigs. One um, gig to score a whole feature-length independent film. I don't know if you know anything about filmmaking, but like just as it is really hard for the musicians to make a full-length album, but like making a feature-length film is just like even 10 times harder. And I had a gig scoring a film, and I also had a gig producing a full length album by a Celtic folk artist I met at the same time. And I don't exactly remember. I mean, know how I managed to balance all those out, but I remember like going to bed with my family early on and then waking up in the middle of the night and working on the music for a few hours with headphones and then going back to bed and that kind of thing. I can't probably never do anything like that anymore. But, I was younger at the time and, just really intensely creative. So,
Awesome. Well, where can people check out the stuff that you are creating and listen to it and follow you?
yeah. So, again, I have a YouTube channel just under my name, Ari Koinuma. And then everybody can find my music I put out as Aristotle's Hope on Spotify and Apple Music and um, all those places. So I guess those would be the two main places that I would point. And then, of course, I'm on all the major social media platforms. I'm very findable.
Sure, definitely. So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing their chance to just put out a message that you resonate with. So, just something that you vibe with that you want to put out there.
Okay. So what I'm most passionate about is, again, um, it might sound a little corny, but the power of music to make us feel something. And as somebody who has experience with like mental health issues and things like that, I'm really well. It's not news to anybody who loves music, but how profoundly moving and therapeutic music is or can be. And I I think that there's a lot there that as much as the music's been around, still that is not tapped deeply enough in terms of how we have these feelings that we're carrying around, and then how music help us to kind of dig them out and feel them, and after that words you have kind of a cathartic or therapeutic experience. And from a musician side, I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities in terms of, how you maximize the impact of the music you're creating. Um, I kind of listen to other people's music, and a lot of things come to me right away in terms of, that beat, could have been aligned a little bit more this way, or that beat kind of takes you out the moment and takes you in a different direction, that kind of thing. And I'm just really interested in making music, and with the intent of sort of creating, a powerful experience. And that, I hope to talk more about that on my YouTube channel, and hope people can sort of find that, there's a lot of thought that go into the music I write and produce. So with that, kind of focus in mind.